The similar vein here, how can the state pay for the Democratic goals of fair funding for all public schools, improved access to health care, and property tax relief?
I don't know right now. I'm not the expert on this, and I know there's a lot of other people in the State House that are. I know enough that I need to listen to other ideas and such, and I don't think anybody can give you an honest answer. We'll do this, or we'll do that, or we'll take here, or we'll take from there. We know we need these. We know we need to work on it. Fair funding for schools is not a new idea. We've been talking about this for years. And probably these are all ideas that we've been bantering around, not just last years, last 5 years. And now we've been hit with depleted revenues because of COVID. I know we need schools. I know that we have to have improved health care, but we're going to have to take a look at the overall fundings and where we should take from in order to do this. I honestly don't know what to tell you. All I know enough to need to listen to better experts with more experience on this.
Leslie, what do you think?
Well, I know that the Commission on Education Funding is looking at the history of how public education has been funded in New Hampshire. They are looking at how other states manage to fund education, and they are working diligently through the pandemic to complete their work and come up with a report with recommendations December 1st of this year that will go to the new legislature for consideration. Another thing that I think Lorrie and Lois and I have all talked about is the idea that, I guess it goes back to what I said a little while ago about, reinventing the wheel and kind of the right hand knowing what the left hand is doing, and really taking a look at our revenue stream. Where does the money come from? I know that there are small business owners who feel that they're taxed doubly with the business profits tax and the business enterprise tax, and they're also paying property taxes on their places of business and their homes. The fairness of that needs to be looked at. I know that there has been some discussion as far as education funding, that many states have a interest in dividends tax, as New Hampshire does, but they also tax capital gains. And I think New Hampshire is one of 10 states in the country that do not have a capital gains tax. But you pay your federal tax, it's interest, dividends, and capital gains. And so there has been some discussion that could be looked at as an additional revenue stream targeted towards public education. But as far as education goes, I think really looking at what that report comes up with and the idea of where does the tax revenue come from? And is it fair? Are there ways to make adjustment to make it more equitable and provide a steadier stream of income? And it's going to be tough, but I think looking at it is an important thing to do.
Lorrie, same question to you. How can the state pay for the goals of Democrats like fair funding for all public schools, improved access to health care, and property tax relief?
Wow, so this is actually a multi-pronged question. We focused on the education piece because we know that.
Right.
That's been a battle since the Claremont case. So for over 20 years, we've been trying to figure out fair funding for education. But there are a lot of pieces to that. And definitely the Democratic platform is more social service oriented. So it's concerned about people having a living wage, people having access to health care. The health care we have been able to manage through what people commonly call Obamacare and expanded Medicaid. And those are two things that, quite frankly, you have over 52,000 Granite Staters that access those that health care, and we need to continue that service for them. That is paid for through federal money, but all money is in fact our money, whether it's federal or it's state. And because of COVID, you're right, we could see some impact there. But I think the things we don't want to destroy is our foundation. And our foundation is healthcare and education. Those things are imperative. And we have seen throughout this COVID crisis that, in fact, the opioid crisis, which was headed in the right direction, sort of stalled. We see that people are drinking and smoking more, and you can't blame them. They're trapped inside because of COVID, so they have to have some way to mitigate their mental health issues. And those are on the rise. So I think the last place you want to cut right now would be in those healthcare areas. So how do you fund it? Well, of course, you look to the federal government for the funding they have been giving in the past and for COVID relief. And it really is up to our congressional candidates to provide that relief to the state level. Where does the money come from? Well, it comes from you and I, but also the federal government can borrow money. They have more borrowing power than the state does. And yes, we are passing this expense on to our children. There's no two ways about it. I have 4 children of my own, and I realize with making those types of decisions what we're doing. On the other hand, if we don't take care of the health care and the education of the people of our state, what will our future look like? Anytime you borrow money for the future, you do it with the intent of being able to pay it back. And you do it for an immediate purpose. And I think that if we fully fund education and our healthcare system for our Granite Staters, that the long-term results will be a more viable and vibrant economy, because people will not be sickly, they will be well, they will be able to work, they will be educated, so they'll be able to get good jobs, and they'll be able to afford the investment that we've made in their future, because they are going to have to pay it back for those of us who make that decision today. And that's a reality. So that's my perspective on it. It's not an easy thing to say. Do these things cost money? Yes, they do. In the same way I save for my child's education to go to college or trade school, we have to do that for our future as well.
And I want to tangent on that. Maybe we can stay with you, Lorrie, and then make our way around. Would you vote to reverse this new business tax?
Well, reverse it or restore it. So Sununu put in place a business cut, and I'd like to point out who benefited from that business tax cut. It wasn't me. It wasn't small business. It was mostly large and out-of-state businesses. So would I restore it to previous levels? Absolutely. I have no problem making large out-of-state businesses pay their fair share for doing business in our state.
Lois, what's your view?
My view on that is, yes, I would vote to reverse the tax cut. It's time to have them start paying their fair share. The large companies, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that it was an incentive to start bringing businesses into New Hampshire. And that's all well and good. Bring them in, make jobs, but they can't be getting a free ride or an almost free ride indefinitely. So I think they need to start paying more. We need them to start paying more to reverse the tax cut and maybe even raise it a little bit in another year. But yes, definitely reverse that tax cut. Yes.
Okay. So
could I add just one more little thing to that? If you talk to
Sure.
business, if you go to the chambers of commerce and talk to businesses, you know what they really hate, the tax they really hate? It's the property tax. The property tax is outrageous. So if you really wanted to cut a tax for business that made a real difference, it'd be the property tax.
All right, solid point. Lois, kind of sticking on this funding thing, there's a theme in people's questions tonight. There's something on the mind of voters in your districts.
Money, and lack of.
What are your positions on marijuana becoming a revenue source?
I am all for legalizing marijuana and taxing it, just like we tax cigarettes.
Okay,
We're an island in New England of, that we're still illegal marijuana and little ounces that's okay and this and that. They're gonna smoke it. I think legalize it. I think regulate it. You don't know what the kids are buying out there. And if we can legalize it and regulate it, I think it'll be safer. And I think, and then tax it. I think it's a great source of revenue.
okay. Lorrie, what do you think?
Back when I had served in the House, I had suggested funding kindergarten with taxation on marijuana, and people didn't find that very funny. But the reality is, it is a revenue source. In the same way we have state liquor stores, we could make a portion of that existing infrastructure, the state liquor store, and some sort of dispensary for marijuana. And since it already exists, we already have a taxation process for our alcohol. We can use a similar process for marijuana. You've got to think about how you want to spend your money. And the reality is we spend a lot of money in law enforcement on this minor issue when there are much more major issues we need to be dealing with. It's usually not the person smoking the joint that you want to go after. It's the drug dealer who's dealing in the opioids you want to go after. So I think we'd save time for law enforcement, although many in the law enforcement community will argue this is a gateway drug. But I still think it's out there. The other states around us have made it legal. We can let them rake in the tax revenue, or we can get part of that tax revenue ourselves. And then in terms of law enforcement, we can determine what we're going to go after. Are we going to go after the kids smoking the joint? Are we going to go after the drug dealer? And I would say, given our opioid crisis, we need to go after that drug dealer.